I'll cover some other software choices and solutions to various lighting and exposure problems. I assume that almost everyone shoots in a RAW format these days, but I'll still spend some time on it because I might be able to offer some helpful tips. I prefer to set the camera to a cloudy or daylight or flash setting. Using any of these settings only means that the LCD readout will be in the middle of the range between warm and cool light. It's best to start your sessions by shooting a gray card for color balance in each location you use. But as you can see here, there's quite a range of colors for gray. Which is best? That depends on a lot of factors, but some are more accurate than others. It's generally accepted that the Expo disc is technically the most accurate when used correctly. If you have a clean white object in the photo, like the dome, and I mean the one on our left, you can use that for color balance. This is actually not a bad way to go either. These coffee filters are pretty close to neutral. They work the same way as the Expo disc, in that you put it in front of your camera, take a picture, then use that image as the color balance reference to click balance on in the RAW conversion software. Because our Venetian blinds are tan, they caused a warm color cast for this shot. But using the coffee filter on the camera, taking a picture in that warm lit area, then click balancing on that image, this is how it should look. A very convenient place to store a gray patch is under your lens cap. Because I color balance in RAW software, I only need a patch large enough for the eyedropper in my RAW conversion software. But because I rarely keep the lens cap with me, a better place to store a gray card is behind the clear case cover on my phone. By the way, this is from a piece of gray cardstock that I happen to have around the house. I compared its gray to a Macbeth color chart and it was very close. But in my opinion, unless you're shooting products where color fidelity is of critical importance, the exact precise color of your gray patch doesn't really matter for people pictures. It's more important just to use it. I like this one called the QP card. It's the size of a paint sample strip and has white, black, and a neutral gray on it. It's used for color as well as contrast adjustments. The main benefit for shooting a gray card is to be able to get the color very close to neutral. Here's an image that was off color as recorded in the camera, and the same image as corrected in Capture One RAW software. There are a number of excellent RAW conversion programs available. Sometimes you can't completely neutralize the color because the existing lighting has large spikes of one color and not enough of the rest. Using RAW conversion software, clicking on the gray card gets rid of the strong color cast, but the color still isn't perfectly clean. So some lighting, such as fluorescents and mercury vapor lamps, just won't give us good color. Going back to the original uncorrected image, I tried neutralizing it in Photoshop instead of the RAW conversion software. As you can see, we've thrown some colors way out of whack, showing that Photoshop is not the best tool to correct color imbalance. However, if you work in the ProPhoto color space, you can get a better result. You can access the Camera Raw filter within Photoshop to work on TIFFs and JPEGs, and usually that works very well, but it didn't on something this far off color. In this case of this really crazy color, using Adobe Camera Raw on a ProPhoto image didn't give me any better results over using the sRGB color space image. So the final verdict here is just do all of your major color and exposure adjustments on the RAW file before you bring it into Photoshop. I didn't bring a gray card with me into this shed with fluorescent lights, but I saw this tool case nearby. It looked fairly neutral to use for a gray card reading. Starting with this off-color image, I used the gray balance settings from the toolbox image to correct this one in Capture One. The point is that sometimes you can find an object that has no color to balance with. Or if you're lucky enough to have them wear something you can click on. Here's another way to get very good color, but it's better suited to stationary objects because people move. This is what the room looked like with the fluorescent lighting. If we try to color balance those lights with just about any method, it still won't be right because fluorescent lights don't have a full spectrum of color. So I fired a flash unit off the ceiling for a large source of neutral and as shadowless as possible soft light. Then I layered them together so the color of that last image is blended with the luminosity of the original image. Again, for this to work, we can't have anything move, so this may be better suited to commercial images. I call this color correction method color stacking. If you're shooting JPEGs when the sky has moving clouds like this, how in the world can you set your color balance? From 1 minute to the next as the sun is shining and then passes behind a cloud, the ambient color temperature could change a few thousand degrees. RAW gives me the ability to shoot away and fine-tune the color later. As an example, I was shooting this in her driveway, and she was in the shade of trees, which is usually a cool color. But it was sunny at this time, and sunlight was bouncing off of the concrete driveway and some other white buildings outside, giving us this very comfortable color. But then a cloud passed over the sun, and the remaining light was mostly blue skylight. These two images show the extreme variation in color from 1 second to the next on a partly cloudy day. Color is very sensitive to location as well. The guy here is just under the shelter roof facing away from the hazy sunlight, which is being blocked by passing clouds. But just a few feet inside that shelter, he's away from that north light, and only being lit by the sunlight reflected off of the swampy pond to our left. Shooting RAW allows me to fix any color problem like that. So for me, shooting JPEGs and gray cards and balancing in camera is impractical because one color balance wouldn't be accurate only a few feet away. Although using a gray card will usually result in the best color for the subject, there are times when you don't want technically neutral color. The sun was at the horizon with the extremely warm color that accompanies the sunset. So this image is too warm. Click balancing with a gray card neutralized all that warmth, but now it doesn't look right. I color balanced this by eye in the RAW conversion, leaving some of the sun's warmth in the image. So keep in mind that there are times when we need to let some or all of a color cast in the image for an effect. I noticed this extremely warm light outside, so I went outside and snapped a picture of it. Now, this has a lot of red in that color and not much else. So I tried to neutralize it by clicking on the white fence to use as a white balance. But as you can see, it just turned the whole thing very blue. And that's not the natural color. So if you encounter something like this that has a really high spike of one color and not much else, then it's best to use the Macbeth color checker. And what that does is it takes a whole bunch of colors into account and builds a profile that'll give you a much closer rendition of what it should really look like.
I got this email from a photographer who appears to be almost in a panic about this whole issue. Just shoot RAW and your life will be easier. Yes, there can be a bit more post-processing, but it's a heck of a lot better and easier to correct problems in RAW than it is with JPEGs. Another reason I photograph RAW is because sometimes in the hustle of a session, I make mistakes. I just picked up a camera where I bought it and went directly to photograph a family with it. What's wrong with that scenario? Well, I thought it was set up for RAW capture, but it wasn't. So I shot the family in JPEGs without a custom white balance. And as you can see, I got what I deserved. There's no way to save the color here. It's way too far to be corrected. So I had to reschedule the family again, and this time I shot it in RAW. For this senior, I had just finished photographing a full-length image where the spot meter wasn't seeing enough of her face to give the proper reading. So I set the camera to manual exposure. The problem with that is, I easily forget to put the camera back on automatic for the rest of the session. Anyway, I blew it, about 2 stops over. But because I was shooting RAW, I was able to salvage the image. A moderately overexposed image can be brought back into line with RAW conversion software. The same cannot be said with JPEGs and Photoshop. A similar predicament here. I was shooting with a manual flash and wanted the camera to be in manual to avoid fluctuating ambient exposures. I really blew it, about 3 stops under. Because it was so underexposed, I could only bring it out partially in the RAW conversion software and the rest of the way in Photoshop. It was grainy but saleable. For mistakes like this, you can also add more grain to give it a more deliberate look.
The dynamic range and ISO performance of a sensor are somewhat linked. So let's take a look at this image that was done around 2002 at ISO 400. This close-up shows what was a very noisy image. It was so noisy and lacking in shadow detail due to its poor dynamic range that most photographers at the time didn't use ISO 400 unless we absolutely had to. And this was properly exposed, not pushed at all.
The dark background would have required some flash units to light that area, but that would have been difficult and required too much time. So I shot the image knowing that I'd be able to bring that dark background up in the RAW conversion. I was able to achieve my goal. However, the background was in very deep shadow, and this can produce excessive noise, even in RAW. So I ended up using Photoshop's noise reduction and a little blur to eliminate the noise. If you foresee this situation, I'd suggest making a longer exposure just for the background. This would avoid bringing up excessive noise either in the RAW conversion or Photoshop.
Now keep in mind that those images were done in the early 2000s, and sensor technology has advanced way beyond that. Now let's take a look at the dynamic range of a current camera, the Canon 5D4. If we grossly underexpose it, of course we'll get a very dark image. Then we bring it into raw conversion software and raise the level. This is almost the same as if we had exposed it at a 5-stop higher ISO in camera. Looking at a closer crop of the properly exposed image, and then the underexposed image, we see very little noise and a very usable image.